First, explain what Afrocentricity is and then the mindset behind your life at that time.
Yeah, well, the great fear is fear of death. And what's on the table is you being the best person that you could possibly be.
You get kicked out of the church. You're gone. What were you thinking you're going to do for the rest of your life?
Well, it's very interesting. I know that there are people who are very much smarter than me, but they can't outwork me. That's the deal.
Your legacy is a number that can't be computed. You've accomplished so much. What is the main thing you're shooting for right now that you're like, I want to be able to reach this?
Well,
welcome to another episode of the Root of Everything podcast. Today we have a special guest, somebody that's one of the most quoted African scholars and authors in the world, was the creator of Afrocentricity, and also started the first PhD program of African American Studies at Temple University. But most importantly, my grandfather, and we're at the Molefi Kete Asante Institute. We have Dr. Molefi Kete Asante. How you doing today, Nana?
well, I am excellent. I feel great being on the root of everything. And I'm delighted very much to be on your program.
Got you. It's a pleasure to have you on here. A big inspiration in my life. And so to be able to just kind of dissect how you've gotten to this point in your life is going to be very interesting for me, and I think for our viewers. But for the viewers to know, who are you from your own perspective? What makes Dr. Molefi Asante?
Well, I am actually an agrarian. I actually come out of a farm tradition. I was a cotton picker by the time I was 11, and I came out of a place where my family in Georgia, in South Georgia, was engaged in working in the fields. You know, we were harvesters, and so that's when I think of myself and my roots. The first thing I think about is the fact that I grew up as a young boy in South Georgia, working in the fields, getting up at 4:30 or 5 in the morning to take the truck with my sister Vera to go and either pick cotton or work in tobacco.
And then what has made you who you are today? Like what would you say is Molefi Asante to the outer world?
Well, I think to the outer world, I mean, people who look at my life or who know me know that I am a person of great discipline. I believe that you have to focus. And I think that if you don't focus, you can't really accomplish much. And in fact, I know that there are people who are very much smarter than me. I've always known that, but they can't outwork me.
They can't outwork.
That's the deal.
Gotcha. We're gonna get into all that.
Okay.
So to start off at the root of everything for you, what would you define as your passion and your definition of success?
Well, my passion is working actually for the African community worldwide. I am engaged, committed, inspired by the fact that there are no people anymore determined to elevate themselves and the world in doing so, and that is in terms of humanity, than the African people. And the African American community is incredible as a community of nobility. And I accept that. I work with that, and I love that because we have been very much engaged in human rights, in civil rights, in equality, and in equity.
Gotcha. And then how would you define success in your life?
Well, success in my life is to come to a point where I have arrived at a comfortable feeling that I have done all that I could do in a particular sector of society. If it's writing, I want to know that I've written as many books as I could. If it's teaching, I want to know that I have taught as many students as I could. If it's anything that I could think of, I mean, I want to have expended my energy in a good way, in a positive way, focused way, disciplined way, to achieve what my father and my mother would have wanted me to do.
Interesting. So to take all that in, you've gotten to that point of knowledge to have that perspective. Could you kind of take us back to when you began to find that passion? People on the other side may not know that you started off in the Church of Christ and then you took a major pivot. Could you explain the point you were in your life that made you have the perspective to maybe want to take a pivot? What was that like from the church and then deciding to come out of it?
That's right. Thank you for reminding me of that. That I actually, when I said agrarian earlier, it was also a very religious background in the sense that my parents were not necessarily overly religious. I mean, I don't ever remember my father and mother, for example, being in church.
Really? Okay.
But they sent us to church. So we definitely grew up in the church. And I grew up after 11 going to a boarding school, which was a religious boarding school in Nashville, Tennessee, called the Nashville Christian Institute. And I think that of all of the experiences that I've had, including the farm experience and working in the hot sun, the discipline that I received from NCI, particularly with the great famous educator Marshall Keeble, I learned, self-control. I learned determination. I learned excellence. These were the things that I learned out of that experience. But I also learned the Bible, and I learned very much all of the arguments that one could have or could learn in a religious sense. I knew the arguments for and against almost everything. So I think it was relatively easy for me at the age of 17, maybe 18, 19, to be a questioner. And I was a deep questioner of everything. And I'm still a questioner. And I hope to be even more radical the older I get. I mean, it is just my ambition is to become much more revolutionary, much more radical, much more free-thinking, and so on. So I think as I finished high school and went into college, first 2 years at Southwestern Christian in Terrell, Texas, and then the last 2 at Oklahoma Christian, I had by that time made the decision that I was no longer committed to the religious pursuit. That basically I saw it as not so much as Marx and others had said, an opium to the people. I found it as a diversion for the people. I found that people were diverted from doing what they needed to do. And if someone cannot rely upon themselves to do something and they want to put it on someone else, even if they call that person God, then I'm saying that you are not necessarily committed to doing something for yourself. And I'm not a beggar, and I don't believe that we should be beggar people. I don't have any interest in begging for ideas or anything. I work for them, and I work hard for them, and I get up earlier. That is the key. So the pivot for me, I think, ultimately was I was actually, when I think about it, I was actually put out of the church. I mean,
you didn't decide to come out. They kicked you out.
Well, I was deciding. It's a very interesting thing when you ask this question. It's a very powerful question because the pivot was I had written an article when I believed that when I said that it just didn't make sense to me that of the billions of people in the world, that only a small percentage, and at that time, I think there were only like 3 million people in the Church of Christ, that they were the only ones who had the chance. Not only, and all of them were not going to heaven, but the only ones who had a chance
to go to heaven. Or
to go to heaven. Out of the 5-6 billion people in the world were those people. I said, this doesn't make any sense to me. So I wrote that. And they said, oh no, he is withdrawn himself from this position where this is a sort of a nobility of the church and that kind of thing. And he's got into something they called it modernism. They didn't understand what modernism was, but it's okay. Yeah.
I think it's interesting. First off, I want to point out one of the points that you made was, well, not that you really intentionally made, but in terms of the root of everything philosophy, you have to fully try something out. And you took your place in the Church of Christ all the way. So you found out
absolutely
what it was. And so that then led you to then be able to question. And,
absolutely.
one of the evolutions of this world, I think, comes from people like you that are willing to question. If we only have people that accept and don't question, we'll never evolve into the next phase of humanity.
Absolutely.
And so it's almost essential to have people like you that are like that. But when it comes to that, the reason most people don't do that is maybe they're afraid of power. They don't have the confidence to do it. How did you feel confident enough to be able to write that article, go against the church, even when maybe everyone around you were telling you to do the opposite?
Well, that's very good. I think there are a couple of things for human beings. One is that you have to, first of all, have confidence in yourself, and you have to have confidence that you are on an ethical path. That your sense of morality is grounded, and that it's a strong sense of being
So trusted.
Moral and trusted. And once you have that, then you can have you have to have no fear. And I think that for most people, this is what I believe. I may not be correct on it because I'm still studying, but I believe most people, the great fear they have is fear of death. But I don't have the fear of death. See, because once you conquer the fear of death, because you know everybody's going to die, so you conquer the fear of death. That's not an issue. Then everything else is on the table. And what's on the table is you being the best person that you could possibly be. But if you have the fear of death, then what happens is that you figure, you start figuring, well, maybe I better try this religion. Maybe I better try this one. Maybe I better try this one. Maybe I better go that path. Maybe I better. I said, no, finish with all that. I don't have to do that. I don't have that fear.
That's interesting. So it's almost like you're saying that fear of death trickles down to every other type of fear.
Absolutely.
Because if your fear of what somebody may think of you, that could ripple into the fear of death. So you think basically all fear is just another layer of the fear of death.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
Well said. I mean, and I think that for me, I think that to conquering that is a key. Well, it's a key almost really for anything. Even those people who say they're in the military world. I mean, the people who go to battle, and we come out with somebody like a Thutmose III, the greatest military leader who's ever lived in the world. I mean, I think at a certain point, and he was like 17 or 18 when he started leading campaigns of war in Africa. And Thutmose III actually had to conquer the fear of death. I mean, you go to war, it's the fear of death. You see, you know, you will. But the thing is, ultimately, we have to live a life that is one that will be remembered as being a courageous life. But you can't live a courageous life if you're scared.
I think one of the things for me that I always use to prepare myself is the thought of death, whatever after this, is something that I really don't understand. And so for me, if I spend my time trying to understand something I'll never understand, I'm wasting the precious time I have on earth. How would you suggest somebody else? That's how I process getting over the fear of death. How would you suggest somebody to get over that fear?
Well, I think that the best way, actually, at least for me, the way I approached it was that I know only what I know. I don't know what I don't know. I cannot know what comes after death, but I know scientifically consciousness doesn't come after death. You're not conscious after death. That death is the end of consciousness because it's the end of your brain. And your brain is what gives you consciousness. So when your brain is gone and your brain is dead, then that's the end. So that's all we know. So the best thing then, in terms of what the ancient people in the Nile Valley in Africa used to say, was that to work for eternal life is to work for a memory, that people who are alive will remember you and with a good name.
That's how you continue.
Yes, that's how you continue.
Got you. That was powerful. Very powerful. And then so we go back into your story. We went into philosophy for a little bit,
Okay.
but you get kicked out of the church.
Yes.
You're gone. You're no longer part of the church Christ. What were you thinking you're going to do for the rest of your life?
Well, it's very, very interesting. It's very interesting because you're right. I won't say. I think you put it more. Did I say kicked out?
Well, that's what you said. I don't know
because that's kind of harsh. I think
you
maybe,
said you wanted to. You're a radical.
Right. What happened? But what actually happened was that one of the leading people in the church wrote a letter criticizing me and said that I had basically left, and so we no longer communicate. They call it excommunication or something like that, some word like that. So that's what happened. And this guy was really famous, R.N. Hogan, who was a main preacher for the Church of Christ. So now, and I had started off when I went to NCI, the Nashville Christian Institute, thinking that I would be a missionary. Think about how crazy this is.
I know.
I was going to be a missionary to Trinidad. Because it's a nice country,
the opposite of
beach. You get all kind of tropical area, that kind of thing. I mean, it just showed me how almost insane the situation was. I mean, there was no way. I mean, after a while that I saw that as to be the end of my life or the goal of my life. And I became a searcher. I became a quester. I read almost everything I could, particularly on philosophy. I wanted to know philosophers. I read most of the outstanding European philosophers. I read African philosophy. I talked to a lot of people. And I began to form a life of searching for knowledge and being able to give knowledge to other people. So that was the pattern that sort of got me out of that church thing and got me into a more intellectual quest, particularly to work for raising the level of the oppressed people. And to fight against oppression.
Was there, like, you're on this quest of knowledge, you're out of the church. Was there a particular thing that ignited that passion for the African culture or the African people? Was there a moment? Was there a book you read? What got it to be not only philosophy and knowledge, but no, this focus right here?
Well, it was a guy named Essien, who was a Nigerian, who was in school with me at the Southwestern in Terrell, Texas.
Okay.
And Essien was the first continental African that I had ever met.
Really?
I had not met anybody from the continent of Africa until I got to college. And I talked to him a lot. And I found him very intelligent, very smart, bright, brilliant. In fact, much smarter than most of my peers. It was like, wow, this guy, and he's from Africa. I mean, so I said, I need to find out more about Africa. I need to find out more about the origins of African Americans. And so it became for me a pattern of development that Essien had set me on this level of telling me what was true and what was not true. I even asked him very stupid questions. Do they have telephones in Africa? Do they have cars?
It's powerful, though.
Do the people work? I mean, what is it? Because I had no idea what Africa was like. And so he set me on a path that I was very fervently committed to finding out all the information I could about Africa.
One of the things for me, as I've gone through school and I've met with other people, especially because I've had the privilege of you and Yanla taking me around the globe and seeing the African continent, all these things, is the difference between my perspective and theirs of the African continent. And it's amazing to hear what people think of it, especially people of color. Would you say that, your acknowledgement of your ignorance of the African continent, of the like, wow, I was thinking all this or I didn't know this, and there's all this history. Do you think that maybe is the main pain point of your motivation?
I think it's the main pivot. It really is. I think you're perfectly right. I mean, and you are. I mean, I'm sure your viewers know. At least you're one of the few people I know who swam in the Nile. But, but it's really.
I like to say that's where I got baptized.
That's right. That's right. Your real baptism. But I think it's a pivot for me. I think you're right that it's that kind of thing that said to me, I need to know more. I don't know all I need to know because education in America did not provide me with any of this in my early years. And even my religious education basically took me further away from Africa than bring me closer to it.
And I think it's a huge robbery because the amount of pride, the amount of inspiration, like just from me going to Egypt for the first time, it was like, how did you rob us of all of this?
Absolutely.
Like for somebody, I like to always say it's very hard to be something you can't see. And so to be able to have this whole group of people on a continent or on a country of the United States, and for them not to know that they can do something, for you to go into class and to your only knowledge of your ancestors is that you were in chains and then you overcame it, and that's it.
That's it.
Wow. I think it's a powerful acknowledgement. It just speaks to your impact on the world. Your purpose is beyond imagination because of that lack of information in the school system.
You are a great grandson. you got every message and every level of understanding because you're perfectly right. Because the thing is that I think that keeping us away and keeping African American people particularly away from the cultural history and of the continent itself really creates a population that is disconnected. We are, in fact, away from our roots. We don't have a sense of values for ourselves because the cutoff has been so tragic and has brought us to this point where many of our young people are lost and they totally don't get the fact that they are connected to thousands of years of history. And so that's part of the whole movement, the direction of trying to come to an understanding of my life and what it means.
Powerful. So we've kind of acknowledged this, robbery of like the youth in the African culture, African American culture of this knowledge. And we've also talked about the inspiration needed to believe you can do something. So not being able to have that knowledge of who you are before your people step foot on this country is powerful. And I kind of talked about how it's very hard to be what you can't see, but there have to be some people that believe even without the seeing. Like,
absolutely.
Like for you, you had that knowledge of going forward without really having people in that lane. What you've done is not something that was really done before you. You kind of believed it before. Kind of talk about your mindset and believing you could do it, and in this journey, even without the inspiration from someone else.
Well, it's almost like when you are, and again, let me take an agrarian example
for the people first. For the people out there, what is an agrarian?
Well, it's someone coming from an agricultural background and so on. All right, so when you pick cotton, you would look way in the beyond the field, and you would see a line of trees, like pine trees or whatever. But you saw that the row of cotton was long, and what you always look forward to was when will I ever reach those trees? Yeah. Because you're working toward it. And I think that in a sense for me, that I always felt like there was something else. I felt like, I'm intelligent, I'm smart. And the only, to back up a little bit, the only white people we saw when I was growing up in Georgia were white people who were mostly uneducated. And particularly the people who paid us at the end of the day for the cotton picking were people who sat on their trucks, chewing tobacco, and paying us our $3-5 for the work that we had done. And I just knew that this was not
This couldn't be it. Yeah.
This couldn't be it. There's something wrong with this picture. This picture was not correct. And even if they had been more educated, it still would not have been the correct picture. Where you have a whole field of African people working in the cotton field, and the white guys sitting at the truck, at the waiting for you to get back to be paid, and they had the money and we had the labor, much like when the Native Americans had the land, and so you have to always do land acknowledgments and labor acknowledgments if you understand anything about America. So for me, I knew that something was wrong. You're right. I did not know. I had no experience as a young child of what was beyond. I knew in my own environment, I tell you what I knew. I knew that Joe Louis could beat any white boxer.
Yeah.
And Joe Louis was our hero. That was the hero. I knew maybe Doree Miller, who most people haven't heard of probably now, but should. Doree Miller was the African-American who during Pearl Harbor, the bombing of Pearl Harbor, shot down 3 or 5 Japanese planes. He had been a cook, and he was from Waco, Texas. So we knew Doree Miller, and we knew Joe Louis. And there were some other people that we knew about. We had heard about Toussaint Louverture and Dessalines from Haiti. But our horizon was very close to us. We couldn't see far because we didn't know, and we didn't know Africa at all. And in fact, all we knew about Africa was it was negative. And the negativity did not come from the Africans. It came from the people who had enslaved us. They told us about how negative it was. So for me, I think I never believed the negativity about Africa, number one. I knew that, as I said, that in a personal sense, my family was a strong family. We were very disciplined. We were all, I say disciplined. There was a lot of indiscipline as well, but we were very argumentative. We questioned a lot of each other. There were a lot of debates in the family, but my father was an intellectual. He went to the 6th grade, but he also studied German and French by correspondence. He studied radio and clockmaking by correspondence. So I knew that there was something, but I didn't know what. So you were right. You don't necessarily have the example in front of you, but yet you are able to move toward the goal because you see that there is something else beyond the immediate situation.
Would you say what percent is more? Was it I'm rejecting that this can't be my reality, and so I'm working toward this isn't because I'm not going to let my life just be this? Or was it more I just know there's something inside of me that has the capabilities, and I know that this can then inspire others? Like,
I think it was what's inside of me. I think that was the most of it.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think that's the inspiration for me was more my own determination to achieve and to actually raise a level of understanding and accomplishment that my family and my community could be happy with. That is, I had a very strong commitment to community.
So then I think there's steps to it. Like you have that, and then you developed all this knowledge, and you got to these different colleges. You studied all these things, but then you decide to make all these bold achievements. Like, for example, creating and founding Afrocentricity. Could you kind of take me through that time of not only, okay, you found that there's more on the horizon, but then it's like, nah, I'm taking this even a step further. I'm creating this. First, explain what Afrocentricity is, and then the mindset behind your life at that time creating it.
Yeah, well, that's a very important question, I think, because Afrocentricity is, in many respects, the most dominant intellectual idea on the African continent right now. And it has grown from a place that was real. That's why it made so much sense to so many people. Here's what it is. And I'm trying to put this in layman's terms and lay person's terms, really. If you look at the world, you have to look at the world from who you are, not look at the world through the eyes of white people, not through the European experience. You look at the world through the experiences of African people, and you question African people in any situation where African people are involved. You want to know what is the role, what is the action of the African person in that space. That is being Afrocentric. Now, it seems simple to a lot of people these days, but it's very complex, because what happens is that we grow up in a world in which the way we see the world is often the same way that's right, the way Europe sees the world. So if I asked, back in the old days, if I asked somebody who has the most beautiful architecture in the world, it would rarely be Africa, for even African people, you see.
But it's
because we have not we have not oriented ourselves to what is beautiful for African people. You see, what's the difference? I mean, what's the difference between the statue of David, for example, and the Dogon statue of the Nomo? I mean, what? There's a difference, and there is beauty in both of them. So you don't have to deny one in order to accept the other. But in Europe, you're basically the European idea for young people and for older people is basically to say the way of the world is to see it the way the Europeans see it. And that's the only way. And so Afrocentricity came as a great denial of that. It says, oh, no, wait a minute. As an African person, when I look at the history of America, I don't see the same things that white people see.
You said complex, but I would like to argue, couldn't you say that it's not complex, but it's more of such a pushback because of what we've been trained to understand? And so when I look at Afrocentricity and some facts of certain things, as in some of the great philosophers that you studied in Europe learned from the Egyptian scholars in Africa.
Absolutely.
I don't think there's anything complex about those facts. I just think people claim they're complex because they can't acknowledge their ignorance.
Yeah, I think that you're probably right on that. That the complexity, I think, comes because we are confused, and in our confusion, we make statements that really suggest our ignorance about our own history and our own culture. And in fact, Afrocentricity, we say theoretically, is a theory that African people are the subjects rather than the objects of the perspectives that we have. We are ourselves actors. We do things. We make things. We create things. We invent things. We philosophize. We African people are doers. We are not simply acted upon, and we're not simply on the margins of Europe, but we are ourselves active, and in fact, we construct things and so forth, and we also destruct things because we're agents. We have our own agency, you see, and so this for some of us, we have assumed that the only right way is the way of the European. And of course, this is a mistake. And the Europeans know that it's a mistake. They recognize it. And that's why we have some European people who study Afrocentricity, because they're interested in trying to understand the world from the point of view of Africans. And that's a useful thing.
And another thing that I think is also useful in this conversation is sometimes the argument maybe a Eurocentric view isn't even on facts, is more of a fear-based of things. What do you think is the basis of the Eurocentric, maybe somebody who is garnering this argument that they don't even believe, but to keep the power in a sense? Like, you look at, a Eurocentric teaching system, it's keeping somebody like me from not becoming who I am. I'm not here without your views, because now I believe. What is the fear in the Eurocentric?
Well, the fear is that they will lose power. This is power is a very big part of the equation. I mean, people assume that they should not share power. Of course, the Afrocentrists always say that power should be shared. There should be multiple centers of power, and that there should not be a hegemony of Europe, that is, where Europe is controlling everything. I mean, the Asians have a perspective, an Asiocentricity, as expressed by the Japanese scholar Yoshitaka Meiki, is a brilliant concept. It's a powerful concept. Let us look at the world through the way the Asian culture sees beauty, and the way it sees philosophy and architecture and communication and so forth. This is just normal, good, tolerant behavior, living in a world where you have so many communities and so many ethnic groups and so many people. But of course, our ultimate origin is Africa. I mean, the Homo sapiens originated only in one continent, and that's Africa. And then we spread to all the other continents. So
that fact by itself.
Yeah, it's a fact by itself, you see, and it's fundamental.
Got you. So with all the things you had with Afrocentricity and all the passion you had for all the things you've done, and then all the achievements you've had after that, what type of consistency and discipline does it take, not only to achieve what you did, but for anybody to achieve success in this world?
Well, I think that people who achieve success most time are people who are willing to devote their energy and their time to whatever the process is and whatever the knowledge necessary is for them to acquire excellence. And so I spent a lot of time on my craft, and I spent a lot of time in the library in the old days, and now I spend a lot of time on the internet. So you absolutely have to be engaged in the process of a posture of discipline and a sort of an entrenched spirit of victory, that I can achieve this, I can accomplish this. So that's the element of success that I think is necessary.
Over a long period of time.
Over a long period of time, which means that it would be turbulent. I mean, there would be many problems. There would be many issues that come forward. But if you start with the right platform, it will help you launch. I mean, I remember as a student at UCLA, I was a member of a group called Harambe, and then I didn't leave Harambe, but I had also had an experience in Nashville of marching with Diane Nash, who was a student at Fisk, who led the attack on segregation in Nashville, the theaters. I did that, and then by the time I got to UCLA, I was deeply engaged in civil rights. So I became the chairperson for the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee chapter at UCLA, and it taught me leadership. That's where I learned my first leadership. I was in Harambe, but I was a leader of SNCC on campus, and that's where I met, people like Stokely Carmichael, who became Kwame Ture, became a friend of mine, and other leaders of that movement. And so what happened is that in terms of success, I talk about being entrenched in a determination, in a determined sense. That means that you have to be committed to something that you start. So you can't just start and stop. You have to be committed to it. So that's why I was committed to it.
Interesting. So it's like, even when things go wrong, it's like this steady dedication to something. What were maybe some of the things you went through in your journey that you had to deal with and continue to keep pushing forward with?
Well, one of the funniest things that happened to me was that when I took over as chairperson of SNCC at UCLA, it was one of those moments during the 60s when we felt we could be quite bold, and we were, as African students on campus. And we walked into a meeting, took over the meeting because it was a lot of white students running the meeting, and we said, we can do this for ourselves. We need to do this ourselves. And so we took over the meeting, and then I was elected as chair of the organization. And the next meeting I called, the only people who showed up were white people. I don't think I had one black person from the meeting where we took over to come. So I saw that as a problem. I mean, if we're going to be committed to crisis, we have to be committed to the constancy of maintaining what we have developed. And so that's why I always think that maintenance is just as important as creativity. You can create things, but can you maintain them? And if you can maintain it, then it demonstrates that you are committed to excellence.
I think one of the things that's powerful is, first, you're dedicated, but you almost have this sense of when to pivot or when to try something new. Something about, I think I've always observed with your life is, you would tell me, I studied there. You had to have had this sense of okay, it's time for the next thing, or you want to paint the painting over there, you paint it. I think that's very interesting, but then when it comes to maintaining it, I think that's when the discipline and the dedication comes through. It's almost mind-boggling how you've kept it up so long, how you've been able to wake up and I see you're writing the 4 books at one time. How do you keep it fun? How do you stay enjoying the process of writing and all the other things you do?
Well, one of the things, and I'm sure probably other people who you interview on the route of everything will say the same thing. What you have to do is to, first of all, yourself. You have to find joy in what you do. Because if you don't find joy in what you do, you won't do it for long. If you like it, you find joy, it brings you, you're interested in it, brings you a sense of peace, it brings you a sense of comfort, then you work with it, you see. So I work with it. I'm able to work with it and do things and have a great sense of joy based fundamentally on the work itself. So that's how I find it.
So would you even call it work, or would you just call it doing what you do?
I call it doing what I do because some people call it work. When you call it work is kind of boring to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But for me, it is doing what I do, and I do it, and it is almost like something that's natural for me.
What would you just say to somebody that's, and I think you'd be the perfect person to answer, that knows what they love to do? They know exactly what they have interest in. They know what gives them that peace, but they're afraid of what people may think. They're afraid if it's possible. What motivation would you say to that person to go out there and try it?
Well, first of all, most people, the worry about what people will say, I've discovered after my life of working that it doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. You do what you do. We have living here in Philadelphia has also been a great joy to me. And we have a saying when I first got here, because I moved from Georgia to Texas to California to Indiana to California to New York to Florida to D.C. To Philadelphia. One of the things I love about Philadelphia is you got to prove yourself. So if you prove yourself in Philadelphia, people accept you. So you don't worry about what people will say. You just do what you're supposed to do. And that Philly attitude of, well, I'm going to do this. And I do it. And then let, whatever, chips fall wherever they may. Because sometimes they fall, sometimes they don't. Sometimes people appreciate what you do, sometimes they don't. But what people say really, no, that's not It's not a big issue. It's not a big issue because people can say anything and they will say anything, and people will have all kinds of responses to you. But basically, you have to be pretty clear that you want to do what you want to do.
I think it's amazing as I listen to your life, and not only right now, but just my whole life, just kind of observing you. And then like, as I keep going in my stages of what I'm doing, I can just see the parallels. And so when you talk about not caring about what people think, when you're going about, like when I start Root of Everything, or I want to be a speaker
Right.
and I have all these opinions, I can't care what people think.
You cannot.
And I like, I'm going to say this though.
Yeah.
When I've gone about my journey,
Yeah.
when I've things I've realized, and I bet you've realized too, it can be lonely in the beginning.
Absolutely.
Because nobody's going to see, like the people you surrounding towards, they're not going to be appeased of whatever you're doing.
Absolutely.
But they're not meant for you in the first place. And what I've realized is while you go on this journey that may be a long time of loneliness,
Yes.
the people you're meant to be around come. Like I look at you
They
and
do.
we're in your
Yes.
institute,
Yes.
and these people flood into your
Yes.
institute
Yes.
because they want to hear what you talk about that started
Yes.
out as a mustard seed of only you understanding what
That's
Afrocentricity is. Now you have Afrocentricity disciples, basically.
Right.
I think I just got to let you know that that's something I'm feeling
That's
from your
good.
life, that I feel the parallel in my
Oh,
life.
that's great. That's beautiful. No, I think you're perfectly right. I mean, and that's what you have done. You have shown us that. You've been a very, very good, strong, fundamental example of that. That you have kept moving, and of course you collect friends and you collect people as you move. Some will stay with you forever, some will not, and then there will be others. But you always are moving in the direction of trying to do and fulfill your mission. I mean, we all are given a mission. Basically, or we accept a mission when we're young. We accept a mission, and I'm writing a book now on Du Bois with a friend of mine, and we're writing on Du Bois, and Du Bois was like 25, and he wrote in his diary that it is his ambition to work only for the uplift of his race. That was an incredible thing at 25 to write that in and then all his life, that's what he did. You see what I mean? I mean, I was not quite that disciplined to say that at 25, but I was impressed when I read that that's what he had said, that that's what he wanted to do. So it's, and then of course, he had people who didn't like him, people criticized him, people argued against him, but in the end, he is the most significant intellectual that African Americans ever produced. That is a model for me. I mean, it's like, yeah, I mean, sometimes people say, well, he did this, but he never was, for example, they have what they call endowed chairs. Du Bois never got an endowed chair. I would tell people, say, Dr. Asante, you've written 100 books. Why don't you have an endowed chair? I said, did Du Bois have one? Did Sheikh Anta Diop have one? Did John Henry Clark have one? What's that about? And it's about careerism. A lot of times that people don't have the mission sense, they have the career sense.
They want the acknowledgement.
Absolutely, you see. So all of that is very important to have an understanding of. All right, and so that's basically it.
And I think it's powerful, what you just hit on at the end. It's the dedication to the true mission and
Absolutely.
not the popularity.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where people get messed
Yeah.
up because you can't put a number on the impact you
cannot.
have. So like for you, your legacy is a number that can't be computed.
Yeah.
And so I think, but that's comes from you not really looking for the acknowledgement or the number.
Absolutely.
It was,
Absolutely.
this is just who I am, what I'm going to do, and this is the mission I'm going to go about.
I thank you so much for that because you're perfectly right. I mean, it was my wife who had to, your Yanlo who had to tell me that I had 100 books. I mean,
You didn't even
she
know.
had to come. No, she found it. I'm saying because my thing is to write the book. I mean, I'm that's what I do. I'm thinking and writing, and so it was her, and she had an exhibition at Temple University of my 100 books.
Really?
So it was these are the kinds of things you do, but you do it because of the mission. That's the key, and you don't do it. The other thing, you don't do it for money, But one of the things you discover in being excellent at your work is that it comes with it. Did you things happen to you and for you. So it's just do your work.
I think it's all about
It's a victorious
making the main thing the main thing.
Absolutely.
And so not really drifting course, because that's what then brings all the rest. I think the people
Absolutely.
that shoot for the popularity are
Absolutely.
never going to be really more popular than the person that is about it for the same reason.
That's right.
There's somebody that was very
That's
like,
right.
I want to write 100 books, but
That's
they weren't
right.
able to
They
write
weren't-
100
that's
books
right.
like at the quality you were able
That's
to do
right.
them. Or they wanted that, but they never
right.
got there because they were in it for the wrong
That's
reasons.
right. Absolutely.
And
Perfect.
so it's very powerful to
Yeah.
even think about
Yeah.
because all those things will come in due time.
Absolutely. That's true. That's
But
true.
then on the other side, because you're so driven, you have this massive legacy that will continue on. Could you imagine that in the beginning when you first set off for the mission?
No, I couldn't really. I mean, I couldn't because I didn't even have the knowledge or the awareness or the consciousness of what a legacy meant. You know, I mean, these things develop and grow as you get more knowledge, and then you say, "Oh, this is one of the things I want to contribute." But I don't think any intellectual or artist or writer really. You don't know. You know, you just know that this is what I have to do.
Yeah.
And once you do it, then you began to see what emerges as you began to see certain things, you see.
And I think that
that's the
stems
development.
from that understanding that you don't
Right.
know everything.
Right.
Like
That's
for me, when I'm going about my journey and maybe I get the applause or whatever it may be, like all I know is I'm up here to speak in this message, and whatever comes from it is what comes from it.
Right.
I think we're so curious as human beings that we
Right.
can't accept
Right.
the things that are beyond understanding. And so like when I look at you, it's like you don't know how much you're impacted me in my journey. Like I don't know how much I've impacted somebody else
That's
in their
right.
journey.
Absolutely.
And so it's this continuous chain reaction.
Yes, it is.
That's beyond our imagination, beyond our actual livelihood, that's continuously being impacted by people.
Absolutely. And I think that given the fact that in my experiences, I changed from communication. I got my doctorate in communication, and then I became really much more involved in African studies and African American studies. And I used to sometimes worry about, well, you know, will people
Listen to me.
listen to me and this and of course, but again, you go back to excellence. If you work in an excellent way and you do your work, people will understand it. And that's what has happened as we began now to develop a new field called Africology, which is the Afrocentric study of all phenomena from the standpoint of African people transgenerationally and transcontinentally. That is, whether you're in Mobile, Alabama, or in Lagos, Nigeria, whether you're talking about 3000 BC, or whether you're talking about 22 or 2300 this era, all of that is Africology. And so we're engaged in that. And that's because I had to commit discipline suicide from my original study of communication and move into this new field of Africology. So sometimes you have to do that. That's a pivot, but it's a good pivot, and it's a useful one.
Yep. And it's all about kind of trusting that gut feeling and all those things.
Yes, it is.
Could you kind of talk about the power of exploring the world? I've been able to have the blessing of traveling the world with you and seeing all these continents. What type of impact does that have on perspective and knowledge?
To me, travel it liberalizes you. It equalizes you. It is the thing that gives you the most experience of just other human beings. I put it this way. There is a story that's told by an African philosopher, and maybe it was Kofi Asari Opoku who told me this, that when the old kings met people, they didn't ask them, what language do you speak, or what degree do you have, or who is your family? They asked people, have you traveled? And I wonder, what does it mean to ask somebody, have you traveled? And what it means is that if you have traveled, you have seen different things. And it does open you up to the world. And I remember, for example, when I first left Georgia to go to Tennessee to the Nashville Christian Institute, I rode the Greyhound. No, I didn't ride the Greyhound bus the first time. First time I was taken there by actually the preacher and his wife drove me up from our church. But later I would go on the Greyhound bus and come back on the Greyhound bus. But one of the things that I discovered is that Valdosta is very flat. I had never seen a mountain. So when we passed through Chattanooga, Tennessee, we saw a mountain. They called it Lookout Mountain. And it was the biggest thing I'd ever seen. And one of the things I remember as a child is telling people that, wow, I saw a mountain that's taller than trees. Because I never
Your
seen
imagination
that.
was even,
Yeah, it was, yeah, you see, and just leaving the coastal plains of Georgia, the flat, level land, and seeing that was amazing. Now, of course, since that time, I've seen mountains much taller than Lookout Mountain,
Yeah.
but that was the biggest thing in my life. So travel, I think, is significant, and for you, you have traveled to these different continents. You've seen these major cities, and you've been to Africa, and you've seen several times, and you've seen different things. So you have a whole different view, than people who have not seen. Now, reading is also important because reading can take you to those places.
That's true.
But to see them and experience them is a different thing.
Interesting perspective. I would love to hear your perspective on. When you read something, you read an autobiography, you learn about somebody's life and what they went through. But then there's another element of actually experiencing something and then learning from that. Like, my parents can tell me don't touch the stove, but then if I touch the stove, now I really know not to touch the stove.
Absolutely.
Do you value reading or experience more?
Well, boy. Well, I think here's the way I put it. I think reading is more accessible
Okay.
to most people because reading is cheaper than travel.
That's true. Yeah.
So because it's accessible, I was my first book. I always tell people because people say he's an Afrocentrist and he's probably been an Afrocentrist all his life. Well, when I was 8 years old, I guess my Aunt Georgia gave me a book, and it was Charles Dickens' stories. And of course, Charles Dickens was from the UK, and but those stories really showed me a lot about life in England and so forth. But I think that reading is where we can reach most of the young people today. And then, of course, music. I mean, that's the other thing. I mean, music is probably much more universal than reading even. And that's why I think that the young generation, particularly the hip-hop generation, was a generation that was probably the most revolutionary generation because that generation basically made African culture worldwide.
That's an interesting point.
We globalized. It globalized African culture. So, I mean, I've heard it in Tokyo. I've heard it in Mexico
It's
City.
everywhere. Everybody wants to be black now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing, too. Yeah. And it's a culture. It's a magnetic culture, you see. And it's because of the rhythms, too.
Yeah. So it's almost like experiences go deeper, but you can get such a vast quantity when you read.
Absolutely.
Got you.
There
Yeah,
you
it makes sense to me. I'm a big personal experience.
Yes.
But there's all these lives we can just learn from.
That's
and
right.
So why not take advantage of them if you truly are committed to whatever mission you have?
Yes, absolutely.
Got you.
Thank
So
you.
To kind of finish things off, is there you've accomplished so much. What is the I'm shooting for this? What is the main thing you're shooting for right now, other than the main mission? But is there like a more physical thing that you're like, I want to be able to reach this next?
Well, I think my mission is much more at this level Now, it's much more a mission of wanting to have my grandchildren in a particular space and place where they can carry forward the mission that I've set forth.
So it's the beyond.
It's beyond a material thing or a building or a thing. I mean, the one thing I hope, of course, in terms of just structure, is to see the developmental scale of the idea behind the Maleficent Asante Institute, which is a think tank. And I would love to see that rise to scale where you have 20 or 30 thought leaders one place working on certain things. But right now, it's my grandchildren.
Okay, well, I'm continuing in that with I like to say, like right now, I'm continuing this legacy. We filmed the whole season of the podcast here.
Thank you.
We're elevating it, and I'm sitting here doing the same thing. I'm sitting here thinking about what I do all the time. I'm never gonna stop. This is what I do. So I want you to, whenever the day is, and it's you're taking your last breath. You'll know forever long. I'm taking my breaths. I'm continuing that legacy. I'm push root of everything, but also acknowledge all the work you've done, and all that work done has given me the opportunity to even know I could do what I can do.
Much love to you. Thank you so much.
Any last advice before we end? If somebody wants to be like you or do a similar route, what would you tell them is some steps they can take?
Well, the only thing is what I've said before. I mean, I really think that if you have the focus, you have discipline, you have a sense of mission, and you also have victorious consciousness, and don't let anybody tell you that you can't do it. And don't, you just go forward. Always go forward. This is what Kwame Nkrumah said. Forward ever, backwards never.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Well, we'll end it with that. Nana, thank you for coming on Root of Everything. I'll remember this interview forever. It was special. Thank you. And everybody on Root of Everything, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure you to rate us on any podcast platform you're watching us on. We're out. Root of Everything. Maleficent Asante.
Thank you very much. All right.